Yes, we are live. So good morning, and this is Agile Mondays, and thank you for joining and welcome. My name is Elena Grink, and I'm responsible for the Central Eastern Europe at the SME Banking Club, and I will be your host today. And each Monday, I'm here with John Mark Williams from Agile Business Consortium and Maria Tsenusa from Integrated Consulting Group. Hello, and thank you very much for joining.
Yep. Hello, both.
Hi.
Again, nice to see you.
Hi. Hello.
So our talk is as usually scheduled for half an hour, and you're welcome to type your questions into the chat right now from the start. So let's go to the topic at once. And during our previous episodes, we discussed the concepts of agility in different segments of the banks, like risks, finance, marketing, and HR. And today we would like to discuss how to scale up agility to the whole organization, and so all the parts of it could make their processes agile and be on the same page about how they are approaching their business issues. And I'm passing the word at once to Maria and John. Maria, would you start?
Yes, I will start right now. Going to the first slide. So yes, because we discussed quite a lot on how to make your departments agile in the sense of the methodology, in the sense of way of working. Why would you want to do that? What is the direction that you would, and the flavors that you'll have in HR, finance, marketing, all the other departments that are supporting the core business sometimes. And yes, and we realized that, well, it's not for the sake of agile as methodology, is actually for the sake of gaining business agility. And now I would like to take a step back and show you actually this slide on the sense that whatever we decide that we want to do with our business, whatever transformation process we want to have in our business, measurement is at the core of it's very important, because measurement is something that will make us realize if we're having any progress, what is the pace of the progress, and especially in these kind of methodologies in which you will have a lot of iteration, trial and errors. Measurement is very important for a company, for a team to understand if they're on the right track and to compare their performance with some previous ones, with some historical performance. And I got here some interesting statistics from McKinsey, in which it is pretty obvious the impact of the transformation. Once you measure the impact of the transformation that you have on any process of any transformation process that you have. So basically, in the first 3 to 6 months, you will realize most of the benefits, and then as the time is passing, you only see smaller and smaller increments of value that you add by your transformation. And this is actually dwelling on the idea of how fast shall we be with our agile transformation in a large company. Shall we have like a little island or 2-3 islands, and then we see in 1 year what is happening? Shall we have a full-fledged transformation that is really quick? Because there are a lot of models that the companies are trying, and I don't think there's a recipe for success. I think the case of each company is different. And I also believe that we should bear in mind that measurement is core, and actually keeping momentum is something that is extremely important. What do you think, John, about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most important things that gets forgotten is that the measurement is actually at the core of agility, of agile behaviors. You know, the idea of being agile is to deliver more and better customer value, whether that is just faster or cheaper or more enjoyably or whatever. However, it needs to be measurably better than otherwise. And I think the beauty of agility in the idea of iterative development requires measurement and effective measurement for us to be able to know whether or not we're moving forward in the right direction. I think this chart is really, really interesting, because the idea of getting most of the value in the first 3 to 6 months fits with this concept of the law of diminishing returns. As we get closer to perfection, we have to try harder and harder and harder to make each step forward. So actually, if we think about it from an agile perspective, looking at what we can do in the first 3 to 6 months, if it's 80% or 60% good enough, actually that's a sufficient foundation for us to try the next iteration of agile development. So I think this is a really clear illustration of the need for us to be agile and to be iterative in the way that we approach transformations, whether that's transformations inside the organization or indeed transformations in the way that we deal direct with customers.
And actually, I've seen 3 cases that I can discuss with you in 3 different banks. So I've seen the case in which everything is done very quickly. So basically, you receive a blueprint from head office, like the storyline. You see how much it fits with your local relevance, and then you simply put people in place and you roll it out in 1 or 2 months. I can tell you that, so this is one side, this is one extreme. I think this has benefits of not wasting too much time, and people just, you announce to the people, you start training people, and then you simply start doing it. A bit of a lean startup way. The negative side of this one that I've seen is that people are mimicking some of the stuff. You don't really have the time to internalize what it means, what is the agile mindset, what it means to change your mindset. And I think especially in a bank, this can be dangerous because banks tend to be more conservative, more hierarchical, more formal, and a lot of internal politics as well. And trying this approach that is really fast would more likely be on the side of people just checking the boxes. I think in an industry that is way more, how shall I say, way more informal, like in a gaming industry or whatever, like IT industry, making these changes seem more natural, even if you make them from one day to another, basically. The other extreme that I've seen, and I think that is also quite dangerous, I've seen a bank in which they have played with this idea for 2 or 3 years. They had decided, mostly in IT department, to put some product people inside as well. But 2-3 years, basically, it was a previous product department to which they attached some IT people, quite isolated. And it ended up, in a way, 2 years after, people not really understanding what is happening there and just being sort of separated by the whole of the bank, by the rest of the bank. And I think this was the point where measurement was missing, because the senior management also lacked the incentive of deciding we go further or we just quit this one because it's not worth it. So I think it was a mix in that situation in which that particular bank decided, because it was sort of, yeah, let's try this new thing, and which was a good thing, but they lacked the measurement in order to really determine that there is a true incentive to scale, or simply the other way around, that is not fitting them, and make a decision. And I don't know, what about you, John? Did you find, what were the situations that you saw, the banks that you've been consulting?
Very, very interesting, because they were very similar, very, very similar to what you've just described. The first thing is, of course, that when one tries to implement a very rapid application of agility, even in a relatively small team, in one team, let alone wider across the bank, the regulatory framework that banks face slows momentum, because it slows the pace at which change can happen, because as we've talked about before, we've got risk and compliance and all that sort of stuff to think about, because they are real things in the banking industry. So regulation slows momentum. What I've also seen is the other thing that you described, which is that separation slows adoption. because separating the team from the rest of the bank allows the rest of the bank to think that's them over there. They do agile stuff. You know, there's a cartoon going around which shows an incredibly complex hierarchy in an organization and a tiny little red box down at the bottom, and somebody proudly pointing at it saying, oh yes, that's our agile project down there. So separation slows adoption, and regulation slows momentum. And I have seen in almost every bank that I've talked to, excuse me, exactly those same syndromes. Yes, so you're absolutely right. I think those are, and because those things are sort of structural in a way, really, they are structural to the banks, but also structural to the way organizations behave. Those two things, regulation and separation, are things which we really need to be aware of when we're trying to scale agility within an organization.
Yes, and I also have the case of an Austrian bank present here on the local market, one of the biggest bank in the market, in which I think it was somewhere in between. And for them, it was the right path. They launched some agile teams throughout the year, like 4 or 5. There were agile teams that were dealing with digital products. And it seemed a bit slow, so it was quite controversial, and it still is at the organization level. It's a lot of discussions, but these teams are quite exposed, and they are really trying, together with the agile coach, they are really trying to instill this agile way of working, and show what they are achieving all to the entire organization. And the funny case was that in case with all this coronavirus happening, actually what happened, I think their path towards becoming more agile increased exponentially because of these harsh times, and because the previous managers that were more, or product owners that were more controlling, really could not control that much people around them because everybody worked from home. I think it really accelerated this path towards agile adoption, and they even managed to launch another agile team for a dedicated product during the Corona lockdown. So, and I have to tell you, it's one of the most traditional conservative banks in Romania. So yes, it's a lot of compliance, it's a lot of regulatory framework, and the banks have a lot of legacy, but it can happen. It all depends with the people that you're working, and depends on the vision that you have. And actually, this takes me to the next slide. This is actually the last one, not too many as usual. So big bang was small steps. We don't like to write much, huh? So we put here some ideas, and would be really interested to share with some of the participants, and also to amongst each other, what were the experiences that we had. How do you start with agile transformation? Okay, so as always, it starts with a vision. So we start bottom and we grow aspirationally, in this graph. And why we put the vision there? Because I think vision is at the core of everything that we're doing, as a person, as a business, as you name it. And vision is something that is not extremely detailed in terms of numbers, but it's extremely, how shall I call it? You can really touch it, you can visualize it, and it acts as a guidance point towards the teams that are acting in uncertainty and in this kind of controversial times that we're in. So basically, this is the guiding light for all those self-organizing teams that we will set up in an agile environment. And it is critical to have a vision to which people to adhere to, and also to which people can relate to, can understand it at a personal level, how it reflects, and also to be inspirational. And there are a lot of examples of nice vision. We have one from a Romanian company from WePath. It's called want to have a computer for everyone, like not a robot. Sorry, a robot for anyone, which is extremely nice in the sense that you really can see it, what they are, what their intention are, and it's extremely inspirational in the sense that they're simply telling people have more value added. You should not do repetitive tasks at work. That should be automated and allow the software robots to do that, and you should only look at the value-added activities. And this is very nice, and everybody is like guided by that. And now the next step is the taxonomy of teams. It's basically from the vision, a company would understand what would make their success or make them unsuccessful in their own operation field, in their industry in 3 years from now. For a bank, it's pretty obvious that it's digitalization, but it has to have more flavors depending on the segment that they operate. And once you decide what will make your success, it will also become quite clear what will also stop existing. And this is very powerful, and you have to, stop a bit and acknowledge that because it helps a lot the people in the change progress. It helps a lot to move on and to let go of the past. And taxonomy of teams is simply putting the right teams on the focus that you'll have that will make the future better for you. I will stop a bit with the talking and ask Olena and John, what do you feel about these things up until now?
Well, I think for me, the first thing is you're right about the vision, because the clarity of the destination in times that are volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous, keeping that clarity of vision is absolutely vital. There's not much point in being agile if we don't know where we're going to go with all of that agility. And I think the key thing about the vision is that the vision itself, because I've often talked about agility as being the antidote to a VUCA world. The vision itself needs to be the antidote to volatility, uncertainty, etc. So it needs to be absolutely clear, absolutely focused, and something like the one that you just described, something that people can easily get to, something they can understand, something they can rationalize, something that they can see in their minds and in the future. And I think without that, there's no point in starting on the destination, on the journey, I think, really. And then thinking about the digitization, you mentioned digitization. I've said before, there are 3 competencies to banking, core competencies: customer service, transactional ability, and risk assessment. And the importance of digitization for banks in achieving agility is that all of those 3 core competencies need to be digitally transformed as much as possible. So anything that can be done by a human being, anything that is done by a human being that can be done by a computer should be done by a computer, because that frees up the human beings to be agile, to do the things that only human beings can do. And I think that vision, and then deciding on how we deploy teams and deploy agility, is really, really important.
Yes, and I will go on with the steps, although I saw there's a comment from Marcus. We will not disregard that. It's just to finish the whole idea. So going to the discussion that we had before and the examples that we presented of the 3 banks that I know in more detail, and they were exactly at the opposite and one in the middle. The sequence of transition is something that I'm always sort of seeing that as being relevant when I'm seeing companies that are having this step-by-step agile adoption. I think it's important for senior management to decide from the beginning what sort of should be the natural steps and also adjust afterwards. But it is important, even if you're agile, I think it's important to have a sort of plan of deployment. Otherwise, you end up 2-3 years later not knowing what to do. You have two agile teams. You don't know what will happen next. So it's important to have that sort of validating your hypothesis. Okay, we make 3 agile teams. Then it means that these teams will be in charge of the products of the future. We will measure their performance. In case the performance reaches this level, or in case we reach these results, then we deploy the next step, and so on and so forth. So you'll have a sort of controlled deployment of the whole organization, but at the same time keeping the pace. Because if you just start and then you move on to a different subject, and then you'll be like, oh yes, there was something with the agile, I think it's you're getting stuck somewhere in the middle, and I think being in the middle is a compromise that is not helping the performance. And then this is how the agile values comes into play. And sequence transition and agile values actually go very much hand in hand, because we discussed quite a lot in this past 2-3 months about how to make your support departments agile, HR, marketing, finance departments. So basically, and I see a lot that, especially in the banks, but not only, a lot of people, a lot of companies get stuck on this taxonomy of teams. So they only make agile in 3, 4, 5 teams, and then the rest of the organization is left behind. So it's extremely important to have the proper values throughout the organization, to share those values of transparency, validated learning, iterative, trial and error, to have that psychological safety, to do a lot of things, to be an entrepreneur as well in the organization, regardless of the department you are, because you have to be one culture that goes in one way, in one direction. And last but not least is the agility across teams. So basically, and this is again sometimes overlooked, and a bank is critical. You have several agile teams that are working sort of in parallel streams, but in a bank especially, you have a lot of the IT background that is linked, it's interconnected, and you have to have a framework as you start scaling the whole agile thing, let's say agile development. You have to have a proper framework of proper corporate governance to manage to synchronize these teams in their development, because having an environment that is highly interconnected is could actually harm you in case you have agile teams that are too independent of each other. Because if you have one team releasing a product that puts your online down, or if your online system is having a release that puts the other products down, it's something that you really have to manage. And this complexity, it helps to sequence the transition, because and have this agility build up as you go, because you'll not get it from the beginning, and governance around it will have to be flexible enough in order to be modified according to what is happening in reality. And the journey that I lived in extending to an agile organization was a very powerful experience for me, because I learned a lot of do's and don'ts. But and yeah, I'm sure if I will do it again, it will be different, hopefully better, but for sure we will make a different mistakes. So
well, this is really interesting, because this goes to actually what Marcus has asked in his question about the issue of regulation, which is, as he says quite rightly, is really crucial, because agility requires collaboration of people working in various departments, and goes against the concept of regulation that actually demands clear responsibilities and strict segregation of responsibilities and stuff like that. And your point, Maria, about the sequencing and the planning actually of the way agility is scaled within organizations is really important in the context of regulation, because you're quite right.
Yes.
Just because we want to be agile doesn't mean we can stop planning. We still have to plan. If we're going to have a destination, we still need to have some idea of what route we should be taking to that destination. And we must, as if we were going from here to somewhere in a car, we have to allow for the fact that there are regulations which stop us doing whatever we want. We can't drive at 400 kilometers an hour, even if our car will do that. We're not allowed to drive across people's gardens or wrong side of the road and stuff like this. Regulations constrain everything, but they do not stop us achieving results. So within the regulatory framework, banks can strive to be agile. And now we have talked before, and I think actually Marcus has even written to us before about the fact that actually there are some conversations that we should be having, both the agile community and the banking community, we should be having with regulators to say, okay, what is the destination that regulators want? And how much agility can be applied to achieving that so that we do protect consumers, for example, that we do ensure that there is integrity and security and reliability and safety and things like that in financial transactions. So all of these various stages from the vision right through to the agility across teams can still be achieved within a regulatory framework. The challenge is ensuring, first of all, that regulators allow banks to be agile where they can, rather than regulators deciding not just the destination, but actually the process we go through to get there. And also banks recognizing that actually sometimes they impose their own rules on top of the regulatory framework, which are not necessary at all. They're obviously the bank is protecting itself from future liabilities, but actually they're not required sometimes to fulfill the regulation. So I think there is a real challenge here for us working in a very strictly regulated industry to be able to have conversations about that 5-stage process that was illustrated on the slide, to have conversations with regulators about how that can be achieved, and the outcome will be better for consumers. This is the key. The vision starts with a better outcome, more value for the customer. And that's the conversation we can have with regulators, I think.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking now while we are discussing, how do you see it, or what are your recommendations from which actually function the banks should start, or this is better to start to scale up agility? Because like we discussed from actually one of the first episodes, that people are in the core of the organization and agile transformation and agile mindset. And if you talk about digitalization, and actually what we see here in the region, that mainly agile methodology is starting from the IT departments and then is scaling up to the business lines. What do you think, from which actual function this is better to start for the banks?
Maria first.
You saw, because I was anxious to say something. So I think I have, I have 3 cases that are different, 2 in the local market. I will not mention the names. That start differently, and another one in Poland that start also differently. And I will go back to the slide. It simply is as simple as that. What is your vision? Where you are on your road to achieving your vision? So basically, we have a case of a company within the same group. One bank in Poland, one in Romania. The bank in Poland, extremely strong on all market segments, top 3, extremely powerful in the retail as well. And they start with digital, lots and lots of digital. Same group, presence in Romania, powerful on the presence on the SMEs and the micro companies, on the modest side. Retail is improving. Same group, this bank here in Romania starts with retail and smaller companies. Same story, the same group, different story. It's actually what is relevant in your context as a bank. Because the bank in Romania saw that future without proper retail operations will not work for them. The history, as they started corporate, and then they went down the market. They realized that the future without proper retail and digitalization, of course, that was not excluding digitalization. It's just that when you started, it's sort of more accent put on the retail, on the launching of products, more products. And then digitalization was like, I don't know, 30 seconds after, let's put it this way, not 1 year after, maybe like a quarter after, but designing the products and everything else was first. In the local market, different bank, starting with digital as well. So stories can be different. You as a bank can have a different context. You might want to decide, and you might realize that a segment will make it or break it for you. It depends on that, and that's where you start, and then you sequence your transition to the rest of the bank. Do not forget the rest of the bank, because it's important. John, what is your experience?
Interesting, actually, because there almost isn't one place to start. I think that, you mentioned on the slide, Marie, a big bang or small steps. I think it needs to be, first of all, you're absolutely right, where one starts, it should be driven by the vision. And definitely and clarity, that's why clarity in that vision is so important. The other thing is to think about, and this is perhaps why digitization has been the focus for transformation of banks. Remember, I talked about the 3 core competencies: customer service, transactional ability, and risk assessment. Actually, if those are the core competencies for a bank, then maybe agility in those 3 core competencies should be the starting point for the vision. And then the bank can decide, okay, do we want to apply this agility and those core competencies in retail, or in business banking, or in corporate banking, and then start not just with the team in corporate banking or in retail, or in our case, in the SME banking team, start in parallel. This is why I say not just one place, start at the same time with the IT team or with the team that's handling digitization. Because we know if the outcome is customer value and competitive advantage, it's not just about the technology, it's also about the people and their relationship with the customer. So we start with the team, whichever team it is, say the SME banking team, and the digitization team, whoever they may be. And your last point on that S-shaped slide, agility across those teams and between those teams, so they're agile each in their function, and they work together. And that would be the starting point for me. Focus on the vision. Where does that tell us we should look at first? And then make sure that whoever is handling the digitization of the bank works alongside that team.
Yeah, agree. So we have one more comment from Marcus, and I actually propose for you to answer, and actually we will be closing today's episode. Okay, so the Marcus remark was that the goals for the agility initiatives want to achieve should be clearly defined years and monitored, and after the milestone achievements should be they reported to the regulator. What do you think on that?
An absolutely brilliant idea, because I think the regulators should be involved as part of the transformation team in the bank. Because every bank will have contacts within the regulators, although they're not allowed to talk to them most of the time and stuff like this. But if we can get over the necessary separation of the regulator from the banks, to have the regulators involved in those conversations would be absolutely great.
And I would only add that it goes two ways, because you mentioned something before, and John, and that was really nice. That the discussion that we should have with the regulator should not be in the sense that how do you want this to be done. It should be in the sense that what would you like to have achieved with this regulation? What is your concern, you regulator? What would you like to control? And address that inherent risk from the core of it, not from the, let's say, the procedural stuff that we assume. And I can discuss with you about an opportunity, because we need to monitor transactions of individuals or of companies, through accounts, to see if there are significant variations from one step to another. I have seen So we were discussing with colleagues in a banking environment, and some of the approaches were like, yes, we will have some Excel files, and when we asked the regulator if we can just give them some reports, and that is done, and they reported the thing that it was over. But actually, in this, we don't like that we are being controlled, but we should see in this also a lot of opportunities. And especially, for example, I give this example with the transactions, monitoring of transactions through account. There is a huge opportunity of understanding the company behavior, the client behavior, yes, and designing products that are better fit to that client. And actually, it starts from a regulation. It starts from a need that you need to understand what is happening in your accounts, and everybody went ballistic, and all the IT systems went upside down in order to manage that information. And yeah, I see, Marcus. I think this is a process, because as Marcus is mentioning that, yes, regulator can be really harsh, and it's true. I don't think, as in a bank, you cannot change from one day to another, because you will not change the regulator. They are very strict, very formal. But I think showing genuine concern on how to actually manage the risk better in a way that the regulator aims to, not just reporting, I gave you this huge Excel file, it has everything you requested, bye. Not having this discussion, going to the core. I think it takes you on a joint direction, because the regulator is not against us. It's just making sure that on the enthusiastic path that we have towards servicing customers, we are not actually putting them in danger. So I see there are opportunities as well.
What a great place to finish.
Yes, John.
Yes, it is. And I think that this is actually absolutely crucial to cooperate with the regulator, because there will be no, I think, success without the cooperation. So
it's the same story with the risk department of the bank. It's exactly the same story. Front office and risk department. They are not like a cat and a mouse, and it should not start like that. And the discussion should start from how we can collaborate, so then we can grow our business healthier. So it's the same story. And actually,
we'll be covering that next week in Bank Investor.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Indeed. Okay, I will let Olena finish. I will stop talking then.
Well, actually, so we will be discussing this next week, and actually next Monday will be our last episode for this season. Mm-hmm. So yes, waiting for everybody next Monday at 11 a.m. And thank you for your engagement and participation today. And yes, see you next Monday online at 11 a.m. Thank you very much. And goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.